Alright, what's up Dragon Brood? This video is going to be a little different. It's something I started doing with the last set, but I figured I would help y'all out by showing you what the most expensive cards are in the latest set, and that's Phyrexia All Will Be One. And the reason this is important, if you decide to go to your local store, and maybe you want to trade some things, or maybe you're going to play in the pre-release, you want to know what cards to look for or hold on to, this could help you out just a little bit. So let's hop in and see what the 10 most expensive cards are in Phyrexia All Will Be One. Now, for no one's surprise, we're starting with Ellishnorn. This is actually very expensive. You're going to see this anywhere between 55 and 60 bucks. And there's a lot of reasons for this. It could be because the card is actually just a really popular character that people want. It could also be that this is going to be very popular in Commander. It's already being touted as one of the most ridiculous Commander cards, blah, blah. So, you know, people are going to value it really highly. Do I think it's going to stay at that number? I don't really know. I could see this coming down even as much as 20 bucks in the early going, especially if a lot of people decide to go to the pre-releases or just open a lot of product for Phyrexia All Will Be One. And the truth is, that might actually happen. People are really excited about this set. It looks really good. It's probably bringing some people out of the woodwork to open some products, so I wouldn't be so quick to buy at this price. But, you know, if you really need one, you need one, but just know that it's really high. Now would be a great time if you want to trade or sell one, though. Another thing to be aware of is that there's going to be, I think, like 6 different versions or 7 of this one card. So their prices are going to start fluctuating all over the place depending on which ones the community kind of, I guess, gears their interest or preference toward. So keep that in mind as well. You may be able to find other versions for less. It's going to be really hard to tell in the early goings. Now, I'm going to admit that Mondread coming in at the $45 to $50 range really kind of surprised me so early in the format. I mean, well, at least in the season. It's not even in a format legally yet. The thing about the card, though, is it is very good and goes into a lot of Commander decks and honestly might even be somewhat of a player in Standard. It's also a big body for 4 mana, and there's not a lot of downside to this type of card. So it's another one that I look at and say, could it maintain its value? Very unlikely. However, I wouldn't be surprised if this does stay in like the $30-ish range if it does have the impact on Commander that people think it's going to have. Ichormoon Gauntlets. Now we're starting to come down to some more normal prices, if you will, but it's still hanging around that $30 price tag. And this is one that, so far, of the ones that are likely to drop, it's probably this one. But the interesting thing about this card is I think even if you got it for $30 today, even let's say it drops to $15 or $20, I do think sometime in the next, now it's a long time, 2 to 2.5 years, it could creep back to that $30 number. This kind of is a new thing we've experienced with some cards being big early on or even in Standard and dropping out and then going back up in value after it rotates out of the format. One of the cards that comes to mind where that happened was actually the Great Hinge. We've seen that continue to creep up after it rotated out of Standard. This is the card that actually could do something similar. Would not surprise me because while it is geared toward Planeswalker decks as the easy option, it does actually work for a lot of other stuff as well. So this card could be a bit of a surprise, and at 3 mana it's very easy to cast, so yeah. I'm not really sure. This one I'm having a hard time calling, but I could see it drop and then rise again. So you wouldn't really be out your money spending it right now, I don't think. Alright, Zapraland, I have to assume is mostly just because of Commander. I don't think Standard players are really going to want to be paying 7 mana for 4/6, even if it does double the power and toughness of the things you have on the board. I mean, we already have an enchantment in Standard that does that, and it doesn't see that much play. So, that much I'm not too concerned about, but I do think it limits the overall potential price or value of this card. But for decks that want redundancy, this now gives you 2 cards to do that in your 100 card deck if you're playing Commander, and there's something to be said for that, because you can generally find 7 mana in Commander without too much work. Now it is at the $30 price tag, so I don't really know if it's going to hold that number, but I could see this being around $20 and being an actual real number at that. So if you can get it at that price, I'd feel a lot better than $30. Sword of Forge and Frontier is a little bit tougher because it has a very wide spread. I've seen this as low as $20 and as high as $28 in a bunch of different places. And I don't know how I feel about that. This is a price that could actually hold there because the swords over time have held their value, several of them being in that $20 range, even with weird reprints. So maybe that's just the price this is going to go for. And honestly, some of the price may actually, because be because of the way people have valued the other ones, right? They've seen the history of the other swords, so they're just hopping on this one in advance. We've seen that with other cards in the past. So it's probably a safe bet at that price, but just know that this is going to be a very popular card, both probably in Standard and for Commander players. Frixion Beliterator is a very interesting one because it also has a wide spread. I've seen this one as low as $14. I've seen it as high as $22. Honestly, I think the 22 high side is way too high. I think this is one you're going to see probably drop down to even the $10 range. I think 14 might even be a bit high. And for two reasons. One, there's already a large supply of this card, so it's possible the old ones are going to eat up some of that value as well for people. And honestly, some people, especially if you're playing in paper during this upcoming RCQ season, they might just want to use old ones because people like using old cards anyway. So it's very possible that the new card doesn't go any higher than where it is now. There's also the other realization that people might find a lot of ways to deal with this card, and if this doesn't end up having the impact people want it to have in Standard, you're going to see that price come down even more. Drivnov Carnage Dominus. This is a very interesting card in the sense that I think we all know exactly the decks this goes in, and you're seeing this in the $20 to $25 range, and oddly enough, I don't think that's unreal for this card. Mostly because the sacrifice or aristocrat type decks, or whatever you want to call them, tend to be very popular. And we do have some of those currently in Standard where this card might live. And we for sure have a couple of different ones that people like to play in Commander. And there's sometimes, it doesn't even have to be based around that. There's just enough maybe triggers in your deck that this card is still useful. And it is an 8/3 creature on top of that. So this is actually a pretty reasonable card to play. And it doesn't surprise me that people are excited about it. Now, I will say I do think the price is somewhat being hyped up by everybody having this cool ability doubler for those sacrifice type decks, but I don't know how, what I would say, inflated the price is. Realistically, $20 does not seem out of the realm of possibility, but once you start going north of that, I'd be a little concerned. All right, Tekkenthal I've seen between $18 and $20. And honestly, that might be a really safe bet on this type of card. Mostly because if you look at the casting cost, it only costs 4 for a 3/5. It flies, which is a good body. And truthfully, whenever you proliferate twice. Like, that's actually going to be very popular. And truthfully, this is something that could randomly make an appearance in Standard. Again, if there's a Planeswalker type deck, this could be the perfect card for something like that. But there's a lot of other reasons you may want to proliferate. And if this card lets you do it twice, that's nothing to turn your nose up at. And for Commander decks, this is going to be very good because there are a ton of different counters that happen over the course of a Commander game. So yeah, this is one that maybe the price it's at is going to be pretty strong. Frixion Vindicator, this is a tough one. If you saw my overrated cards video, I definitely had this on the list, but sometimes when something's overrated, it means a lot of people really want it. And that's kind of the case here. This is a 4-mana 5/5 with a supremely good upside. And truthfully, I think this is the type of card that's always going to be popular in Commander. I can't see a time where people wouldn't want to play this card. I mean, thinking about it, we play more expensive cards at 5, 6, and 7 mana that have various versions of this type of ability, but this gets that on a sizable body, and it happens to fly for some reason, and it's just 4 mana. So I think this is actually a really safe call if you can snag one in the like $18 to $20 range. Could be very good for you, and honestly, it might still have a lot of upside to it. I'd expect this to be very popular in trades and a lot of people looking for this, and it wouldn't be shocked if you could get as much as maybe $23-ish. If somebody gives you 25, great. But yeah, this card's going to have a lot of value, and it's probably going to hold it for a while. And then next up, we have Tyranex Rex. This one isn't going for too much. I've seen it as low as 14 and high as 19, so that is still a $5 spread, so make of that what you will. I think realistically this is going to fall, at least for its time in Standard, closer to the $14 side, maybe even down to $12. And I think that's probably fair. I mean, we compare it to something like Carnage Tyrant, that hung around that like 15-ish, even got up to 20 late in the Standard season. And that seems kind of reasonable, right? It kind of hung out in that range. So I could see this doing the same thing. It could maybe hold that $14, $15. But I think the difference is it's going to come down to how much Standard people end up playing in paper. Because we do have an RCQ season coming up, but that's only going to last a couple of months. So after we get 3 months down the road, how do people still feel about playing more Standard? It's possible this could kick off a bunch of people playing Standard since they will now own Standard decks. And then that gives this card a little bit more life in those formats. But if it doesn't, I think that could be a little bit of a restriction on this card. But again, I think if you can get it in that $12 to $14 range, I don't think you're going to lose a bunch of money on it. And it is a useful card if you're playing Commander. And even again in Standard, it could be good in some of those different environments, depending on if you end up playing against a bunch of Control or Mono Blue and those become real decks for the new Standard. So this one's probably going to be format dependent, but I do think it's at a close to fair price right now. So if you want one, go for it. Now, one of the other things I want to mention is that there is something like over 40 rares and or mythics right now from Phyrexia All Will Be One that carry close to a $4, and I mean, you know, like $3.70, $3.80, but that value or higher, which means you have a really high chance of just getting your value out of a booster pack. So I don't know what that's going to do to people opening more of the set or buying more of it, but right now the value is really high, and I think that speaks a lot to just the interest in Phyrexia and the old Magic stories kind of being brought to the forefront again. But it also is a really good time to sell and trade some cards if you open up some extras you don't need, whether that be at pre-release or out of a booster box. Because I think if you wait, there's a good chance a big chunk of those cards are going to come down in value, and you're going to have a hard time selling them. Not so much at the ones at the very top that come down, but the ones on the lower side could eventually slip to bulk or something if people end up not playing with them. So if you have some on that lower side that you're not using, I would probably trade, get some store credit or whatever the case is, and see if you can trade those up to some other things. But there are a lot pulling a bunch of value in this set right now, and that's actually pretty impressive. But let me know if any of these cards surprised you or something that you think should be worth more than it is that might be undervalued right now. And if you want to see the cards that I thought were the jankiest cards in the set that are probably going to be the most fun to build around, check out this other video I've got right here.